What really happens when we die? It's a question that has haunted humans for as long as we've walked the earth. For many, death is the end, a cold finality. In the modern world, we often inherit a fear-based idea of what lies beyond. A blank void, a heaven or hell, a place of judgment. But the Aztecs saw things differently. To them, death wasn't something to dread or avoid. It was part of a grand design, a sacred rhythm that flowed alongside life, not a doorway that closes, but one that opens. Not an end, but a return. In Aztec thought, life and death were intertwined, each feeding into the other in a great cosmic cycle. The soul didn't simply vanish. It moved, it changed, it transformed. Depending on how a person lived, and more importantly, how they died, the soul followed a particular path into one of several realms. As more people begin to awaken to deeper spiritual realities, the Aztec vision of the afterlife offers something profound, a multidimensional understanding of death not as destruction, but as transformation. Do these ancient teachings truly hold clues for a modern soul in search of meaning? To answer that, we need to step into the Aztec cosmos, where time spirals, the gods speak through elements, and the journey never truly ends. Let's get into it. So, where does the soul go after death? To get the answer to that, we must first understand how the Aztecs viewed life itself, not as a linear journey from birth to death, but as part of a greater cosmic cycle. Life and death were not opposites. They were reflections of the same divine process, like inhaling and exhaling. One could not exist without the other. This worldview was grounded in a deep spiritual framework where the universe was alive with sacred energy. Everything, from stones to stars, from humans to storms, was animated by Teotl. Teotl wasn't a god in the way modern religions describe deities. It was the essence of divinity itself, a force that flowed through all things, giving them life, form, and motion. In this sense, death wasn't the absence of life, but a shift in how Teotl moved through the soul. Each person was also born with a tonali, a personal life force, linked to the sun and believed to reside in the head. It was tied to one's destiny, character, and vitality. The tonali could grow stronger through deeds and rituals, or weaken through fear, trauma, or imbalance. At death, this vital energy didn't dissolve. It returned to the cosmic current, rejoining the flow of Teotl. Aztec rituals often focused on maintaining harmony between these spiritual forces. Festivals honoring the dead, such as Mictlan, celebrated ancestors not as mourned absences, but as active presences in the cycle of life. Offerings of food, flowers, and incense weren't acts of grief. They were acts of nourishment, feeding the journey of the soul. Importantly, the Aztecs didn't believe that moral behavior alone dictated the soul's afterlife. Instead, it was the manner of death, the energetic imprint left at the moment of crossing, that determined the soul's destination. This is a striking contrast to more familiar doctrines of reward and punishment. In Aztec thought, even those who died in battle or sacrifice were not seen as lost. They were honored for returning energy to the universe in its purest form. Nature played a crucial role in this cosmology. Fire, wind, water, and earth weren't just physical elements. They were living portals to other worlds. To die by drowning was to be claimed by the domain of Tlaloc, the rain god. To die in childbirth was to become a spiritual warrior, just like those who fell in battle. Every death was a return, but where that return led depended on the resonance of the life force at its final breath. This vision of death wasn't static. It was movement. It was sacred transmutation. In many ways, it resembled the seasonal cycles of planting and harvest. The seed disappears, but it isn't gone. It is transforming, quietly beneath the soil, preparing to emerge again. In the Aztec worldview, the soul did not travel to a single place after death. Instead, it followed one of 4 distinct paths, each deeply symbolic, each reflecting a different energetic signature. These weren't heavens or hells, they were spiritual domains, each serving a cosmic purpose in the flow of life, death, and rebirth. Let's examine these 4 paths. First, Tonatiuh, the sun's domain. Reserved for warriors, sacrificial victims, and women who died in childbirth, Tonatiuh was a realm of radiance. These souls were believed to rise with the sun, accompanying it through the sky. At dawn, they marched ahead of it like divine escorts. At dusk, they followed it into the underworld. Over time, these souls were said to return to Earth in transformed forms, as butterflies, hummingbirds, or other winged beings. Not as punishment or reward, but as symbols of energy transformed. In Aztec poetry, the butterfly was not delicate. It was sacred. A flicker of spirit returned to dance among the living. 2. Tlalocan, the rain paradise. Tlalocan was lush, fertile, and vibrant, a paradise ruled by Tlaloc, the god of rain, fertility, and earthly abundance. This realm welcomed those who died from water-related causes, drowning, lightning, illnesses associated with moisture. But despite the somber means of death, the afterlife offered peace. Tlalocan was not a place of trial. It was easeful, healing, and restorative. Here, souls existed in harmony with nature, surrounded by waterfalls, blooming plants, and constant renewal. It symbolized the soul's return to abundance and serenity, where suffering dissolved like rain absorbed by the earth. 3. Mictlan, the underworld of 9 levels. Most people, those who died of natural causes unrelated to water or battle, entered Mictlan, the underworld. But Mictlan was not a dark prison. It was a journey. This vast underworld contained 9 levels, each representing a challenge, a test of soul and spirit. It was believed that this journey took 4 years, during which the soul would pass rivers, mountains, winds, and shadows, guided by the dog Xoloitzcuintli. These weren't punishments. They were purifications, a shedding of earthly layers, ego, and memory before the soul rejoined the source. Mictlan reminds us that death, for most, is a process, not a sudden leap, but a gradual release. 4th, Chichihuacuauco, the infant realm. Unique among Aztec beliefs is Chichihuacuauco, the realm for babies and infants who died before being named or initiated. Here, their souls were nurtured by celestial wet nurses beneath a milk-giving tree. This realm was not a holding space, but a preparation ground. The infants were believed to return in a future golden age, reborn into a world made whole. Chichihuacuauco reflected the Aztec reverence for potential, the understanding that even brief life carried sacred momentum. These 4 destinations weren't just geography for the dead, they were maps of the soul's resonance. Where one went after death was less about justice and more about frequency. The Aztecs didn't ask, was this life good or bad? They asked, what kind of energy is now returning to the universe, and where is it most needed? Now, one thing to note is that the Aztecs' idea moves beyond the concept of death as a judgment or a moral weighing. It suggests that existence is energetic, and every soul carries a unique tone, shaped by their final breath. Warriors didn't go to the sun's domain because they were righteous, but because their deaths, intense, charged, sacrificial, resonated with the fire of the cosmos. In contrast, those who passed through water through soft surrender were received by Tlaloc's lush and gentle paradise. It wasn't about reward, it was alignment. Each afterlife realm represented a particular frequency band. Tonatiuh radiated with fire and courage. Tlalocan echoed with water and growth. Mictlan pulsed with earth and shadow. Chichihuacuauco vibrated with innocence and potential. A soul's destination wasn't chosen. It was magnetized, drawn like sound to a tuning fork. This perspective reconfigures how one might approach death, not as punishment or escape, but as a continuation of energetic law. The moment of death, then, is a kind of cosmic sorting, not by merit, but by resonance. Importantly, these frequencies didn't exist in isolation. They formed a balanced web. Just as the earth needs fire, rain, roots, and rebirth, the universe needed souls to return in different ways. Each realm served the harmony of the whole. There's a quiet wisdom here that how one leaves this world influences how one enters the next, not because of divine reward, but because of the energy one carries. Death was not a door slamming shut. It was a frequency shift, the soul tuning into a new wavelength of existence. In today's language, we might call this a recalibration of consciousness. But for the Aztecs, it was simple. Everything has a place in the cosmic rhythm. And death, like life, moves in patterns, not lines. The difference between Aztecs and Mictlan is that for the majority of Aztecs, death did not lead immediately to rest. However, to Mictlan, the deep underworld composed of 9 distinct levels. Unlike other afterlife realms tied to specific manners of death, Mictlan was for the ordinary soul. But its ordinariness did not mean ease. The journey through Mictlan was long, difficult, and deeply symbolic. Each level of Mictlan posed a metaphysical challenge, not just physical obstacles, but spiritual confrontations. The soul faced piercing winds that stripped away memory, obsidian mountains that clashed together, rivers of blood filled with jaguars, and total darkness that tested the will to continue. These were not punishments, they were thresholds. The soul's passage through these trials wasn't about suffering, it was about release. The Aztecs believed that death clung to the body and spirit like layers of clothing, layers of identity, ego, fear, and attachment. The journey through Mictlan gradually peeled these away. Each trial forced the soul to surrender something, desire, status, even self-image. What remained was essence, the part of the soul that was eternal. At the end of the 9th level, the soul arrived at Chikuna Mictlan, the final gate. Here, all illusions dissolved. The soul, now stripped of its earthly imprint, was absorbed into the source, a reunion with the divine force from which it had come. Guidance was not denied. The Soloitzcuintli, a sacred hairless dog, often appeared at the beginning of the journey to help the soul cross the first river. But it would only help those who had treated dogs kindly in life, a subtle echo of spiritual reciprocity woven into this otherwise non-judgmental cosmology. What's striking is that the soul's progression through Mictlan was measured not in time alone, but in transformation. The 4-year passage symbolized a slow alchemical process. It suggests that the afterlife, like life itself, unfolds gradually, in stages, and with purpose. In this light, Mictlan was not a place of punishment. It was sacred refinement, a slow burning away of illusion, not to destroy the soul, but to free it. In facing Mictlan, the soul didn't suffer for how it lived. It simply continued the work it had always been doing, shedding what it was not, to remember what it truly is. The Aztec vision of the afterlife, though uniquely embedded in Mesoamerican cosmology, shares striking parallels with spiritual teachings from distant corners of the world. Across cultures and epochs, the soul's journey after death has often been seen not as a one-step transition, but as a layered process, a passage through trials, realms, and transformations. In Tibetan Buddhism, the Bardo Thodol, often called the Tibetan Book of the Dead, describes the Bardo, an intermediate state between death and rebirth. Here, the soul encounters visions, illusions, and reflections of its own mind. Liberation or rebirth depends not on judgment from outside forces, but on how the soul responds to these inner projections. Like Mictlan, the Bardo is a mirror, a place where the soul confronts itself and its attachments. Ancient Egyptian beliefs also echo this motif. In the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, the soul must navigate a perilous landscape filled with gates, guardians, and symbolic challenges. Eventually, it faces the weighing of the heart, not to determine guilt, but to assess balance. A heart free of heaviness, of earthly burdens, moves on. The journey is again one of purification, where the soul's true nature is revealed through challenge. Even modern accounts of near-death experiences often describe tunnels, lights, life reviews, or encounters with beings of energy. These reports aren't always shaped by specific religions, yet they consistently describe movement, confrontation, and release, the same themes present in Aztec, Tibetan, and Egyptian models. What unites these diverse traditions is not dogma but pattern. The soul is seen as dynamic. Death is never portrayed as a full stop. Instead, it's a crossing, a mirror, a return. Trials do not exist to punish, but to clarify. Darkness is not the enemy, but the space through which light is remembered. These similarities suggest something deeper than coincidence, perhaps a universal intuition shared by cultures thousands of miles apart that death is an initiation. And initiations require passage, test, and transformation. In this shared wisdom, the Aztecs are not alone. Their layered vision of the afterlife becomes part of a global spiritual language, one that speaks of cycles, thresholds, and the soul's quiet unfolding beyond the veil. In an age of scientific certainties and fast-paced living, death often becomes something hidden, sterilized, avoided, reduced to silence. But for those seeking deeper meaning, the Aztec afterlife offers a powerful invitation to see death not as a void, but as a continuation of consciousness, and perhaps even as a key to understanding life itself. For the spiritual seeker, the four Aztec realms can be seen not only as destinations after death, but as inner states experienced throughout a lifetime. Tonatiuh-Hichin, the sun's domain, may reflect those moments of courage, sacrifice, or transformation when the self is burned away and something brighter emerges. Tlalocan, the paradise of water, mirrors those times of deep healing, emotional surrender, and renewal. Mictlan, with its 9 trials, speaks to the long, often silent work of releasing ego, attachments, and illusions. And Chichihuacuauco, the realm of the infants, reminds us that even unrealized potential holds sacred value, waiting for the right time to return. These symbolic spaces are not distant mythologies. They're archetypal patterns, unfolding in dreams, synchronicities, personal losses, and spiritual awakenings. Death, in this broader sense, can happen many times in one life. When identity falls apart, when belief systems crumble, when grief tears through the soul. Each of these is a passage, a small Mictlan, asking the spirit to refine, release, and remember. Modern spiritual practices like meditation, shadow work, or plant medicine journeys echo this same structure. Descent, confrontation, clarity, emergence. What the Aztecs articulated in myth and ritual, today's seekers often find through personal experience. Even ancestral memory, something the Aztecs held sacred, continues to stir in modern people. Some report feeling inexplicable pulls to certain symbols, animals, or places. Others experience dreams of lost relatives or signs during periods of grief. These may be remnants of a deeper knowing, what the Aztecs would have seen as the soul's continuity within a cosmic lineage. In reclaiming death as part of the spiritual path, the Aztec model offers more than comfort. It offers context. Death becomes not the enemy, but the teacher, not the opposite of life, but its hidden twin. For the seeker willing to look deeper, the Aztec cosmos reveals something quietly transformative, that every ending is a rhythm, and every rhythm, if listened to closely, can lead home. Summarily, to the Aztecs, death was not the breaking of a story, but the turning of a page. Each realm, from the sun-drenched skies of Tonatiuh-Hichan to the quiet shadows of Mictlan, reflected a different aspect of spiritual truth. Together, they painted a picture not of finality, but of movement, of purpose. A soul wasn't judged. It was guided, drawn to the place where its energy could serve the cosmic whole. For those awakening today, there's something quietly liberating in this vision. It reminds us that transformation doesn't begin after death. It is already happening, moment by moment. In every act of letting go, in every shift of identity, something dies, and something deeper endures. The Aztecs saw the soul not as a static thing, but as a flow, always returning, always becoming. That view doesn't just offer a new understanding of the afterlife, it offers a new way to live. To honor death is to honor life, its cycles, its symbols, its silences. So perhaps the question is not what happens after we die, but how can we live in a way that aligns with what never dies? Let that question echo, not to be answered, but to be carried, like a quiet song from the other side.